Creating a news agenda that reflects an unbiased view of Asian current affairs without relying on external news sources. Asia Vision, Asian news through Asian eyes.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello and welcome to AVN, your go-to source for all the major news stories. I'm Utma Mahmood, and for the next 30 minutes, we'll unpack the biggest headlines from around the globe. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) is reported in its latest forecast the outlook for global growth has improved but still faces medium-term challenges.
The IMF said ahead of the release of the World Economic Outlook during this week's annual meetings that inflation is moderating back towards target and growth stabilizing, but long-term productivity gains are still lackluster. IMF Deputy Director of Research, Petya Cueva-Brooks, stated that inflation is coming down as expected.
Inflation is coming down as we had expected, and in most countries we are expecting it to be back to targets. At the same time, the global economy has been quite resilient, and we're expecting growth rate to be 3.2 both this year and next.
The release of the report comes as continued war in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East sparks geopolitical unease, and many governments in advanced economies are signaling a turn towards adopting more protectionist measures. The deputy director said that the main downside risks are the escalations of these geopolitical conflicts, trade protectionism, weaker labor markets, and financial market turbulence.
We see an escalation of geopolitical conflict, or we see a ratcheting up of trade protectionism, or that we see more weakening in labor markets than what we expect in the baseline, or that we see a renewed bout of financial market turbulence.
The IMF had three main recommendations to policymakers, one relating to monetary policies, another related to fiscal policies, and the third being related to boosting medium-term growth.
Ahead of King Charles and Queen Camilla's arrival in Samoa, the government there has made it clear that its key priority is using the CHOGM event to champion action on climate change and gender equality, as well as showcasing the country to international media and the high-level visitors.
Spirits are unbowed. Most people are really excited about this event. It's just absolute bedlam in the centre of Apia this morning, with motorcades zipping about and a sense of optimism when you speak to most people here about what this event can do for Samoa. Not only is it bringing a huge infusion of people and potentially a large infusion of cash into the city centre, most people here are excited about the fact that there'll be an awful lot of media from around the world, an awful lot of leaders here. They think that that offers them a really valuable platform to talk about the issues that really matter to them. There are a couple of things that are really going to be sharply in focus. At the top of the list possibly is climate finance. One common complaint from a large number of developing countries in the Commonwealth, that's not just Pacific nations, but also Caribbean island nations and, of course, African nations, which have a huge presence in the Commonwealth, has been that they simply can't get access to climate finance as quickly as they need it to deal with the cascading impacts that we're seeing now from climate change. So there's a frustration that when they go through big international bodies, it's simply too long, too laborious and too clunky a process. Now, the Commonwealth has played a role here. It's mobilised some $350 million in climate finance. It wants to mobilise another $500 million. But I think it's likely that developed nations who are a part of the Commonwealth, like Australia, like the United Kingdom, and like Canada, just for example, are probably going to come under some pressure here at CHOGM, not just over their fossil fuel subsidies, but also over that issue of climate finance. Perhaps there might be some demands for countries like Australia to step up with greater contributions to some of those international funds.
Hyundai Motor India launched the country's biggest initial public offering IPO on Tuesday in financial capital of Mumbai.
The stock listed at 1,934 rupees, $23 on the National Stock Exchange NSE below its offer price of 1,960 rupees, $23.31, and traded down 4% at 1,882.10 rupees, $22.39, giving the company a valuation of 1.53 trillion rupees, about $18.2 billion. India's number 2 car maker with a market share of 15% was targeting a valuation of $19 billion through the IPO. Its record $3.3 billion IPO was oversubscribed more than twofold last week, led largely by institutional investors. But pricing concerns deterred retail investors who worried they would not be able to make gains on the listing. Shares of Indian rivals have also slipped in recent weeks as car sales slow after 2 years of record highs, with customers delaying purchases on worries about stubborn inflation. Tuesday's listing in Mumbai in Hyundai Motor's first debut outside its home market of South Korea and comes at a time when India's equity markets have risen sharply. With competitions from domestic rivals Tata Motors and Mahindra, Hyundai Motor plans to use proceeds from its sale of a stake of 17.5% in the Indian unit to invest in research and launch new products. 7 of India's 10 largest IPOs include Hyundai India, reported listing day losses ranging from 5% to 27%, according to data from Dealogic.
Chinese President Xi Jinping met with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin on Tuesday in Kazan, the capital city of Russia's Republic of Tatarstan.
Chinese President Xi Jinping said that China and Russia have found the right way for neighboring major countries to get along with each other, which features non-alliance, non-confrontation, and not targeting any third party. Noting that this marks the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Russia, Xi said that over the past years, the relationship between the two countries has weathered challenges. Despite complex and severe external threats, bilateral cooperation in areas such as trade continues to advance, and large-scale joint projects remain stable in operation. Xi added that both countries should further promote the alignment of the Belt and Road Initiative with the Eurasian Economic Union to support their respective high-quality economic development. Xi stressed that next year marks the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations and the victory of the World Anti-Fascist War. For his part, Putin said that since the establishment of diplomatic ties between Russia and China 75 years ago, the two countries have developed into comprehensive strategic partners for coordination for the new era, with bilateral relations maintaining high-level growth and forging a model for a new type of relationship between major countries. He said that thanks to joint efforts from both sides, the Russia-China cooperation based on equality and mutual benefit continues to advance, and the activities of the Russia-China Years of Culture have been successfully held, adding that Russia stands steady to further deepen cooperation with China and boost the development and revitalization of both countries. Noting that next year marks the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, Putin said that both Russia and China made tremendous sacrifices for victory in the World Anti-Fascist War, and that Russia is willing to commemorate this important milestone together with China. He added that Russia is also ready to maintain close high-level exchanges and strategic communication and coordination with China in international affairs, and work with China to uphold international fairness and justice as well as global strategic stability. Putin thanked China for its support during Russia's presidency of BRICS, stressing that Russia is ready to closely cooperate with China to ensure the success of the first BRICS summit after its expansion, driving positive outcomes in greater BRICS cooperation. The two heads of state also made in-depth exchange of views on major international and regional issues of common concern.
As the sole female candidate from the ruling Liberal Democratic Party LDP running in her 20-seat prefecture at Sunday's general election, Karen Makishima represents the struggle women face in Japan's male-dominated politics.
Presently, only 16% of LDP candidates in the current election are women, compared to 22% for the opposition Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, CDPJ. Gender inequality may not be a top issue in Sunday's snap election, but the scandal-hit LDP, which also faces an upper house poll by July, needs every vote from both men and women with polls suggesting it may lose its long-held majority. Yet, despite the LDP's pledge to bridge one of the world's largest gender gaps in politics and the government's target of having women make up 35% of all lower house candidates by 2025, it is unlikely that its ambitious plan will be realized. Between making stump speeches and posing for photos in her coastal constituency of Odawara, about 2 hours' drive from the capital Tokyo, Makashima told that female candidates struggle to overcome the gender gap in Japanese politics. While surveys show societal attitudes towards women in Japan is a barrier, some also say the ruling LDP, which has governed for almost all the post-war period, is not serious about shrinking the gender gap in lawmakers, citing its failure to implement bolder measures. Last year, the LDP set its own party gender target of 30 female lawmakers by 2033. But some gender equality experts say it needs more concrete plans like gender quotas. The issues facing women in politics in Japan include gender stereotypes, difficulties balancing other commitments such as child-rearing, and harassment, according to a report issued by the government in 2021. Nearly 60% of female respondents to a survey of more than 5,000 local lawmakers in 2022 to 2021 said they had suffered harassment from the public or colleagues versus a third of male respondents. Nevertheless, Makashima, who won her seat by a large margin in 2021, remains hopeful for broader change.
Indonesia's Prabowo Subianto on Sunday took over as president of the world's third-largest democracy, going to combat internal issues such as corruption that plague the country and to make it more self-sufficient.
The 73-year-old has undergone a remarkable transformation from being a former military commander facing unproven allegations of rights abuses to sweeping the polls and now leading the country of 280 million people. Wearing a traditional black hat and a navy suit with a woven maroon and gold sarong, Prabowo officially became Indonesia's 8th president on Sunday morning after he was sworn in during a ceremony at Indonesia's parliament. Prabowo, who unsuccessfully ran for the presidency twice before, said in a fiery speech to lawmakers he would be president for all Indonesians and challenged the nation to help him face down the country's problems. In a wide-ranging speech lasting about an hour, Prabowo said self-sufficiency for food was possible within 5 years, while also pledging to become self-sufficient in energy. The new president vowed to eradicate corruption and said that while he wanted to live in a democracy, it must be polite. Prabowo won the February 14th contest with nearly 60% of the vote and has spent the past 9 months building a formidable parliamentary coalition. He was joined in the swearing-in ceremony by his running mate Gibran Rakabuming Raka, 37, the eldest son of the outgoing President Jokowi Widodo. After his speech, Prabowo wore a baseball cap and waved through a car sunroof as he made his way to the presidential palace, passing thousands of flag-waving supporters thronging Jakarta's street in a festival-like atmosphere. Flower boards outside the palace either congratulated Prabowo and Gibran or thanked Jokowi for his decade of service. Jokowi supporters are also attending the celebrations to bid farewell to Indonesia's outgoing leader. Jokowi has left an indelible mark on the nation of 280 million, presiding over a period of strong economic growth and massive infrastructure development. Indonesian police and military have put in place strict security measures, deploying at least 100,000 personnel across the city, including snipers and anti-raid units. China sent Vice President Han Zheng to the inauguration, while the delegation from the United States is being led by U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield. Prabowo also touched on foreign policy during his speech, saying Indonesia was non-aligned on the global stage, but that he stood in support of the Palestinian people and said Jakarta was ready to send more aid to Gaza.
Australian mining giant BHP goes on trial over one of Brazil's worst environmental disasters, potentially triggering billions of dollars in compensation to be shared among hundreds of thousands of plaintiffs. The High Court in London will examine over several months whether BHP was partly liable for the 2015 collapse of a dam at a mining waste site in Brazil. The rupture killed 19 people and unleashed a deluge of thick, toxic mud into villages, fields, rainforests, rivers, and the ocean. The Fondo-Terling Dam at an iron ore mine in the mountains of Minas Gerais state was managed by Samarco, co-owned by BHP and Brazilian miner Well. At the time of the disaster, BHP had global headquarters in the UK as well as in Australia. A separate case in Brazil has seen Well and BHP offer to pay almost $30 billion in compensation. Well has offered to share any compensation BHP ends up paying as a result of the London trial. Tom Goodhart of law firm August Goodhart, which brought the case, told a news conference last week that the London trial was the culmination of a 6-year UK legal battle. The tragedy in the town of Mariana unleashed a torrent of almost 45 million cubic meters of highly toxic mining waste sludge, flooding 39 towns and leaving more than 600 people homeless. The flood killed thousands of animals and devastated protected areas of tropical rainforest. The amount of damages sought in the upcoming civil trial is estimated at a total of $47 billion on behalf of more than 620,000 plaintiffs, including 46 Brazilian municipalities, companies, and indigenous peoples. The hearing, set to last until early March, must determine BHP's potential liability surrounding the disaster. If it is found to be liable, another UK trial should take place from October 2026 to determine the amount of damages. BHP has said the London court case is unnecessary because of ongoing legal procedures in Brazil. The company estimated that more than 200,000 plaintiffs in the London case had already been compensated. BHP added that the Renova Foundation, which manages the compensation and rehabilitation programs, has already paid out more than $7.8 billion in emergency financial aid. New studies show racism is rife in Queensland schools, with more than 100 children reportedly experiencing it firsthand. Now, a Brisbane mother is calling for racist behaviour to result in expulsion.
Cheeto was horrified when her 8-year-old daughter explained she'd been racially targeted at school several times.
My heart dropped, really. I wasn't expecting something like that to happen so soon.
Floored by the revelation, the Brisbane mother made a plea to her parent group chat.
Please talk to your children. My child can't change her skin colour. That's how she's born.
Cheeto also met with the principal at the school in Brisbane's West, who she says downplayed the severity of the racist incidents.
Why is my daughter being asked to continue as normal with a person who's constantly targeting her for something she can do nothing about?
Recently, the Queensland African Coalition Council surveyed 150 African youth from both private and public schools and found 100% of them had been racially abused at school.
Isn't enjoyable, but it's somewhere where they say you should have fun, learning. But it's when you wake up and you just don't want to go anymore. It's
there was never a question in my mind that these kids actually experience racism, but it's just a matter of at what level and the degree of racism that they had to go through.
The QACC's survey is part of a broader report which includes recommendations for tackling racism in schools.
We need to make sure that they actually employ people from diverse background to support some of these kids during and after school.
Frustrated she got little support from her daughter's school, Cheetah created a petition calling for racism to be grounds for expulsion.
I would hate for my daughters in 20 years, 30 years' time to be sitting down having an interview like this about race.
She says she has hundreds of signatures already. Tatenda Chibika, ABC News, Brisbane.
Dozens of Cubans marched in the capital, Havana, banging pots to protest against prolonged blackout.
Dozens of Cubans marched banging pots in protest against the prolonged blackouts they have been enduring after the national power grid collapsed more than 72 hours ago. Chanting, "Turn on the lights," Cuban families protested through the streets of the populous Centro Habana neighborhood without any violent incidents with authorities. In a televised statement on Monday, the Cuban president said that power had been restored to 90% of Havana. The electric company of the Cuban capital later reported that damages due to breakdowns remain in some areas, including the area where the protest took place. In the last 2 days, Cubans protested by banging pots and blocking some streets in some neighborhoods of Havana. Most of Cuba's eastern tip remained without power and communications in the latest of multiple grid collapses during the past 4 days. The unprecedented nationwide blackout is the latest blow in the nation of 10 million that is already suffering from dramatic shortages of food, medicine and fuel, even as tropical storm Oscar lashed the island's eastern end down in trees and power lines. Cuba's electrical grid first failed around midday on Friday after one of the island's largest power plants shut down. Cuba's grid fully or partially failed 3 times since, underscoring the precarious state of the country's infrastructure, putting many frustrated Cubans in poor outlying neighborhoods on edge.
Constellation Energy announced last month that it struck a deal to revive 3 Mile Island with the purpose of fueling data centers owned by Microsoft.
While the financial details of the 20-year power contract have not been made public, several financial groups say Microsoft likely agreed to pay more than $100 a megawatt hour, double what is typical for purchasing renewable electricity in the region. The effort to restore Unit 1 at 3 Mile Island is expected to take 4 years, at least $1.6 billion, and thousands of workers to complete the unproven task of restarting a nuclear plant that has been retired. Successfully reviving 3 Mile Island, which is widely known for a 1979 partial meltdown that chilled the U.S. nuclear industry for decades, would put the plant at the front edge of an industry revival. Nuclear produces large amount of carbon-free electricity, which is attractive to companies like Microsoft that have climate promises to investors and face increasing public scrutiny for their voracious power use. Constellation Vice President of Generation, Brian Hansen, said that many fundamental changes have occurred in the industry, such that their nuclear plants operate better than any other nuclear plant in the world today.
That's it for this week. Thank you for watching. Have a pleasant day ahead. Bye-bye.
Creating a news agenda that reflects an unbiased view of Asian current affairs without relying on external news sources. Asia Vision, Asian news through Asian eyes.
Gaume demitumutaka nota madamaga salame rakkatere kurumataka emmiskame deni ebegge rajye ebegge milkuge gotugabe